Hey guys, so it's bed chronicles for today. I just have had the most amazing start to the morning. And as I often do, I was watching clips on YouTube. I came across a lady's testimony. Beautiful young lady who was married and had an amazing husband, two young children. She was describing the almost near perfect life. We know that's not real. We can't have a perfect life. But it was amazing. And then one evening, her husband had gone off to play his weekly soccer match, and she got a frantic knock on the door from the neighbor saying, "Come, he's collapsed. He's basically having CPR." And when she got to the sports field, her husband had collapsed after playing soccer, and according to the story, had been without oxygen for 24 minutes, which you don't need to be medically trained to know that that is not life sustaining. You can't survive. It didn't look very hopeful. And she, being a believer and somebody who with faith, was praying, "No, Lord, no, don't take him," kind of thing. Her testimony is quite, it's something that a lot of people experience, where you go through stuff that you don't want to go through. You experience things that you don't want to experience. They struggled for 24 minutes to bring his heart back, or to get his heart going, and he spent a long time in hospital. And when the man finally recovered, he was never the same. He clearly was quite brain damaged and impaired, and he was not capable of the life that he'd led before the incident. And the reason I'm going to share a few testimonies is to get to a point, so I hope you'll stick with me, because I really want to reach out and touch hearts that are struggling and questioning and wondering what's going on and why. Sorry, I'm just going to move the tripod a bit, because as you know, raw and real, and we're not editing, and I know that it's bouncing a little bit. So I hope that's okay. Sorry guys. As I said, raw and real, because we don't want to bring any weird extras into it. Okay, so the point of her testimony is that, a believing woman, a praying woman, a woman who stood on her faith with God, and yet the outcome was not what she would have wanted or what she hoped for. And her testimony is about how she had to learn to cope with that, and how she walked with the Lord because of that. The other person who I want to mention is Alwyn Ace, who is a South African evangelist. He speaks, he has a prophetic channel, etc. And I've come to know Alwyn over the last good while. Came across his channel, started listening to him, started listening to his personal testimony, his story. And if you don't know him, well, go and look him up, Alwyn Ace. And he has a testimony of having had a car accident as a young man. He was a professional athlete. After the car accident, he was left paralyzed from the waist down, and he's in a wheelchair. He's been that way for more than 10 years, I believe. And he's still a young man in his prime, in his 30s. Now, Alwyn is standing in faith, and I wholeheartedly stand with and agree with him for healing, a miraculous healing, where he can regain function and stand up out of that wheelchair. But it hasn't happened yet. He's still in the wheelchair, and there is a chance that he may never get out of that wheelchair. And I hate to even say that, but what I'm getting to is, in a moment, I'm trying to get to a point to also just encourage people. So bear with me. Please stay with me, because I really want to touch hearts and encourage with what I do. These videos are meant for love and support and encouragement to just us mere humans. That's why I don't edit. That's why it's raw and real, and it's pretty much without bells and whistles, and it's bouncy and whatever. I want to share my own personal testimony a little bit also. So when my mom was 72 years old, she nearly died. Oh, sorry, the cat's joining us. There could be more bouncing on the tripod. My mom was an alcoholic. If you caught any of my other videos, cat, you're just fuzzling the process. Yeah, oops. Come on, get on with it. Sorry, guys. Hey. So when my mom was 72, she had a bleeding ulcer. Okay, the cat is getting herself organized. Lovely. What are you doing? Get in the bed and go to sleep. Oh, my soul. I do this because I want you guys to realize that it's raw and real, and it's unedited, and it's straight from my heart. And I ask the Lord always to just infuse what I say with his hope and love and support and care and kindness. I want that to come through. That's the main focus and goal of why I share and why I do this. So my mom had been an alcoholic since I can remember. I mean, that's what I grew up with, parents who were alcoholic. And over the years, my mom had destroyed her health, obviously, because, she wasn't totally caring for herself. So when she was 72, she had a bleeding ulcer, stomach ulcer, which she didn't know about, or if she did, she just didn't bother to seek it. She wasn't in pain. That's the weirdest part. She actually had an ulcer that had pierced or gone through the lining of her stomach wall, and she was bleeding a lot, and so her hemoglobin levels in her blood had dropped really low. And it came to a head the one day when my mom was barely conscious. She was out of it, and we thought, oh, she's just quite hungover, but she didn't recover. And the next morning when my brother contacted me, she lived with him, and when my brother contacted me, he said, something's wrong, mom's not kind of snapping out of it like she would normally do after a binge, And I went over and I could see immediately, we're in trouble. We called the ambulance. They literally stabilized her for quite a while, and then we got her to an emergency room. When they did the blood tests, her HB, for those of you that don't know, it's hemoglobin reading, was 3.6. Now, I'm a paramedic, and I know that's practically, you can't even live with a hemoglobin. Oh, cat, seriously. Sorry, you can't live with a hemoglobin that low. I mean, even when your hemoglobin drops to about 8, you're already not well. So my mom went into the ward. The doctor saw her. I gave a history, and the specialist said, wow, no, thank you for sharing what you shared, and we need to get your mom into theatre now. And so we sat outside, my sister-in-law and I, waiting. The doctor finally came out, and she said, look, we found this bleeding ulcer. We also think we found stomach cancer, and your mom is really not well. It's touch and go kind of thing. And I was, as a paramedic, I know what all of this is about, and I was really distraught. I was terrified. At that stage, I was not ready to lose my mom. And not long after, they wheeled my mom out of theatre, and they came past where we were on the way back to the ward, and I just broke down. I sobbed because I could see immediately this is not good. My mom was struggling to breathe. I could see she wasn't all there. When you look at somebody and they're not there, there's just, her eyes were glassy. She was gasping for breath. And I still thought, why are they taking her back to the ward? She's clearly not stable. This is not right. So I sobbed with my sister-in-law sitting in the passageway at the hospital. And then shortly, a little while later, they came charging back out of that ward on their way to ICU, rightly so. And they were, using artificial means to help my mom breathe. She was placed on a ventilator, and they'd been giving her bags of blood to try and get her HB up. They'd stopped the bleeding with a temporary procedure that they didn't do surgery. They just put a camera down. And so the doctors came and said, look, so I could see, I didn't need the doctors to tell me this is touch and go. I was in such a state at that stage. I was in such shock, and I was in such trauma that I didn't even pray. I was numb. I was just, At that stage, my walk with the Lord had gone a little off the boil, if we can say. And so my first reaction wasn't to pray and wasn't to reach out to the Lord. It just wasn't. I was numb. I was shocked. I was terrified. My mom was dying. And for 2 days, they were waiting for the tests to come back to see if it was cancer, because the doctor said, look, to do the surgery on her stomach to sort out this ruptured ulcer, we need to first know if we're dealing with cancer, because that changes the way we do the surgery. So for 2 days, mom lay in ICU. She was really critical. She was hooked up to all the machines, and her vital signs were really unstable and not good. So eventually, after 2 days, I got a phone call the early morning, and the doctor said, look, we haven't got the test results back yet, but your mom has started bleeding again. Her HB levels are dropping, and we now have to go in and do the surgery, because quite literally, if we don't, she's dying. And I just want to say to you, I'm so sorry, but I don't think she's going to survive the surgery. It's like one of those hideous moments where it's a catch-22. They've got to do the surgery, but the doctor's telling you, if I don't do the surgery, your mom will die. And if I do the surgery, your mom's pretty much going to die. Eek, what now? And I can remember I told my sister-in-law, and she said, I'm coming to fetch you. And I said, no, don't fetch me. I'm not going to the hospital. I'm staying at home. In fact, I kid you not, I was sitting right here in this position where I am right now on my bed. And I've never known such terror and fear and trauma and whatever. I was in such a state. And at that stage, I realized, wow, I need the Lord now. And I started praying, and I spent 5 hours. I can remember I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I wrestled with God, and I argued and I shouted and I said, God, you know what? I am really scared right now. I had to first go through and wrestle with the fear and the trauma of possibly losing my mom, because I knew I was no longer in control of this situation. I can't change anything. This is totally beyond my ability to change anything. But I knew God could, and I was fighting with God, and I was arguing with God and saying, listen, Lord, you have the power of life and death in your hands. If you take my mother today, I don't know if I'm ever going to talk to you again. I don't know if I'm ever going to want to keep walking with you. I'm really scared of that, even more than I'm scared of losing my mom, which was quite a realization for me. It was quite an interesting and very traumatic and very weird experience. But I can remember fighting with God and saying to him, listen, you are the creator. I believe that. I believe in you. You have the power. You have the power of life and death. I want my mom. I don't want my mom to go now. She can go later. You know, eternity's a long time. Just a few more years with my mom, please. And there was this weird feeling, I kid you not, it was like a physical sensation that I kind of felt almost like a breakthrough, like a pop, like a release, all of that trauma, that tension, that fear, that anxiety, you know, wrestling sensation. And I was like, oh, what was that? Wow, it was such a strange sensation. I just felt such peace and calm. And I was like, okay. And not very long after that, the doctor phoned and said, your mom made it through surgery and etc. And we didn't find cancer. It's not cancer. And we've sorted out her stomach. We've removed most of her stomach because it was so damaged by this ulcer and her drinking. But it was still touch and go. And I can remember my mom stayed in ICU for 3 weeks on a ventilator before she woke up. And then a week later, she was discharged and she came home. So at the time, I was mind blown with gratitude and relief, etc. But I kind of got this sensation inside of me where I felt like God was saying to me, your mom will not make it past 77. And at that stage, she was 72. And so it was. My mom died just after she had turned 77. But without going into tons of details, there were 2 other episodes between that one and when my mom finally did pass away, where, you know, she still had issues and struggles with health. She broke her hip. They said she'll never walk again. She did. A few months later, she was walking. A few months after that original incident, she was living with my brother in the Cape. They'd moved as a family, and she carried on drinking. And she'd actually fallen into the fountain in their yard, and she drowned. She was lying there when my sister-in-law found her in the morning. It was terrible, and I got a phone call from the paramedics on scene where they were trying to revive her, and they said, we don't know if she passed out, we don't know if she had a stroke, we don't know what's happened, but this is the situation. And I spoke to the paramedic, one paramedic to another, and I knew, oh, this is beyond serious. This is life and death again. We're facing the same thing 6 months later. I barely put the phone down, and I was already praying again, wrestling with the Lord at that time, and ended up speaking to her specialist. She was in ICU on a ventilator again. He was telling me, look, this is what it is. This is how it looks. And, you know, it's looking pretty bleak. And I was like, I don't care. I don't accept that. I know what God did the first time around. I'm still not ready to lose her. And I know this might sound a bit weird. We don't dictate to God, okay? We don't. We ask God. We walk with God. We have a relationship with him. We interact with the Lord on a personal level. And we pour out our hearts to him, and then we trust him and we just let go, which is what I was busy learning how to do. And eventually I just said, well, I don't care what everybody's saying. I put the phone down and I started praying because I'd already seen what God did the first time around, which was miraculous. So I then, the next day, get a phone call. Not only is my mom off the ventilator, she went home. I was like, what? Even I, the paramedic and the faithful believer, was shocked. Wow. From ventilator, not very hopeful from the specialist's own mouth, to she's going home, she's fine. Huh? So the point is, guys, what I'm trying to share, and I hope this is not getting too long. You know, we have life, we have stuff happen to us, things go on in life. We never know what's going to happen and when. Every day is more than we can control. Every day, the circumstances around us are not within our control. We cannot control life. We cannot control what will happen to us or those around us, nor can we choose the outcome, but we can intercede for them. We can pray for them. We can then engage with God and say, please, this is how I'm feeling and this is what I'm asking you for. But you know, we've got to sometimes realize that although the outcome may not be what we expect, things may not go the way we want, like the lady whose husband has not left. He's alive, but he's not the same. And living with him is quite a sad and difficult and ongoing struggle. Alvain Ace is in a wheelchair. He's an amazing man, filled with faith and prayer and miracles, and yet he himself is still stuck in a wheelchair, and he may never get out of that wheelchair, but he may, depending on what the Lord is going to do and when. And sometimes life can be very hard when God doesn't seem to do things the way we think he should, the way we want him to. And that can be the challenge. So I'm not going to make this video any longer. I'm going to wrap it up for here. But I want to say to you guys, and I want to encourage everybody that may listen to this, please let this be, let this channel grow, because I want to reach people who are going through stuff, who are struggling with stuff, who are really feeling so lost in their circumstances, in the world, in life. Where is God? What is God doing? Does God even exist? Well, if he does, because God's not doing things the way we think he should or the way we expect him to, the outcome isn't how we would hope. You know, when my mom finally passed away, I knew that was not going to be a time when I begged and screamed and argued with God. I knew it was time. We'd had an extra 5 years with my mom, and I could also feel the peace and the, you know, it's time. We all grow old, we all die. Some of us don't grow old, we still die. The point is, God is not the enemy, and God is not the one who hates us, and God is not indifferent and impersonal. He is beyond words, beyond measure, beyond anything. And he loves us, and he understands things way more than we do. We don't understand anything. We can't see the full picture. We don't know what all the bits and the pieces are. We don't see eternity. We don't see what happens to us on the other side. We don't see any of it, but God does. So we've got to rest in the peace and the knowledge of God has promised he'll work out all things for the good, even when it doesn't look like it, or even when it's not the way we would like it to be. His word and his truth and his promises are still irrefutable. And so please hold on. If you're struggling, if you're going through stuff, if you are really in a bad place or in a bad way, or maybe you're angry with God, maybe you don't even believe God exists because of the things that have happened. I just want to promise you and reassure you, yes, God loves you. Yes, God is real. Yes, he's there. He's right there. He's closer than the breath in our lungs, because the breath in our lungs is from his hand. So I'm not going to extend this video, but I am going to touch on these kinds of things more and more and more going forward. So be blessed. Hold on. Keep going. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. If times are really dark and tough, God is the one who you turn to in those moments. I promise you, it doesn't always work out or look on the surface or on the outside how you think it should, but he is infinitely wiser and more able and more capable. So I hope that is an encouragement to at least someone out there today. Okay, I'll catch you guys on the other side. Cheers.